My boyfriend works late hours, and when I know he's on his way to my house, I'll sit and wait for him in the kitchen to greet him. The main door is in front of me while the back porch one is behind me. Tends to come through that one so my dog doesn't bark. Called me a few minutes ago and said he just left work and he's on his way. So I did my normal and sat at the kitchen table, scrolling on my phone until I got the "I'm outside" text. After a few minutes of scrolling, I heard his voice. The only light outside of my house was the porch light, so I look out of the kitchen window and nobody's there. "Baby, come outside." Normally his voice is reassuring and welcoming, but I had a terrible feeling and decided to call his cell phone. His phone is a track phone that he buys service for, so sometimes it simply rings twice, which is what it did, every time I called. Eventually, I gave up and stepped on the back porch to look outside. Maybe his phone died and he needed me to unlock the door for him. I could feel my heart drop when I remembered the door was unlocked. I start to text him, asking him to answer his phone, but while I'm doing this, the voice turns from a gentle tone to an angry one. It yelled my full name and told me to come outside. My boyfriend never calls me by my full name. At this point, I'm starting to feel scared. I looked outside and it now knows that I'm not in the kitchen, and I looked out of the back porch window. I call him again. After what felt like hours, he answered in a concerned way, apologizing because his phone was on vibrate, as well as it not working. "Well, why are you telling me to come outside?" Those were the first words I said. There was an immediate silence over the line. "What do you mean? I'm just now on your road." He sounded worried, but I could tell he thought I was pranking him. The voice was getting angrier by the second. He cussed at me and eventually started banging on the door. It was so loud that even my boyfriend could hear it through the phone. I heard the car speed up, and then the sound of gravel from him pulling into my driveway. I finally mustered up the courage to move the curtain, see if there was really anyone there. There was nothing there, but I could see him running up the stairs to get to me. Once he got in the voice, and the banging came to a complete stop. I stood shaken while he looked around my yard, only to see a deer running away on its hind legs, just for the front two to hit the ground in front of it as it went into the nearby woods. We didn't sleep much that night, and eventually we plan on moving somewhere that's closer to the city, as my house is out of the way from any other people. Right now, I'm hiding in my closet, typing this out in case something happens to me. I was hungry, so I went downstairs. Why didn't I just go to sleep? I stood in front of the fridge, the only light being the blue emitting from the fridge, along with the blast of cold air. When I realized there was absolutely nothing good, I turned from the fridge, and then I froze in place. I could see from my window that there was something in the street. At first, I thought it was a shadow, but when I walked closer, my heart stopped. It was a person lying flat on their back, arms out, staring up at the sky. I inched closer to the window. The person appeared to be a man by the build, but something was off about the body. I couldn't quite place it, but it made my skin crawl. Slowly, I picked up my phone I had left on the counter and opened the camera. With a shaking hand, I snapped a picture of the person. By doing that simple action, my fate was sealed. The flash shone through the window as the image was captured. The person's head jerked in the direction of me. Our eyes locked. Its face was completely black except for the red eyes and mouth full of sharp teeth. Now that it was looking at me, I could see that its entire body was black, as if it was devoid of any light, as if it was made of darkness. I watched in fear as it got onto its feet, revealing its true form. It was over 8 feet tall, with arms that brushed against the concrete. It had sharp nails at the end of each grotesquely long finger, and it was looking directly at me. Its eyes were hungry as we stared at each other. Then it started running. My body unfroze and I broke out into a sprint. I ran upstairs right as I heard something slam into my house. Glass shattered downstairs and I heard a guttural scream. It was inside. I ran into my closet and pushed the clothes out of the way, bearing myself to get away from whatever that thing in my house was. Loud footsteps echoed throughout my house. My heart slammed against my chest as its voice traveled through the walls. It is animalistic, not of this world.
I can smell your flesh.
I held my breath as if that would do anything. I could hear scratching against the walls as the footsteps progressed through the house. With every step, I could feel the house tremor.
Your blood smells sweet. Can I taste it?
Tears slipped down my face as it drug its nails across a wall not far from where I was hiding. I waited for it to get closer to get me, but the house was silent after that last scratch. It's been 5 minutes of silence. I think it may have left. I think I'm safe. But I'll wait. I'll wait until I know it's truly safe. When? I think it's tapping on the door. I've always been fascinated by old houses, and when I stumbled upon a neglected Victorian mansion in a small town, I couldn't resist the urge to explore its secrets. Rumors circulated that the house was haunted, but I brushed them off as mere superstitions. Little did I know that my curiosity would unleash an unspeakable terror. After negotiating with the owner, I obtained permission to investigate the mansion. As I stepped through its creaking front door, a shiver ran down my spine. The air inside felt heavy, as if it carried the weight of forgotten memories. Ignoring the ominous atmosphere, I descended into the basement. The stone steps were slick with moisture, and the scent of mildew hung in the air. My flashlight's feeble beam illuminated a labyrinth of cramped corridors and small chambers, each one darker and more foreboding than the last. As I delved deeper, an unsettling feeling crept over me. I became acutely aware of something watching me from the shadows, something that did not want to be discovered. But I pressed on, drawn by an inexplicable compulsion. In one of the far corners, I discovered a hidden room. Its door, barely visible under layers of peeling wallpaper, beckoned me closer. With a trembling hand, I turned the rusty knob and entered a chamber untouched by time. The room was adorned with peculiar symbols etched into the walls and floor. The air inside was thick with an otherworldly energy, suffocating yet seductive. In the center stood an ancient pedestal, on which rested an ornate silver-encased mirror. Against my better judgment, I approached the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, but it seemed subtly distorted, as if the glass held a dark secret. I reached out to touch its surface, and a searing pain shot through my hand, causing me to recoil in horror. Suddenly, a low, guttural voice resonated from the depths of my room. "You have awakened us," it whispered, its words dripping with malice. "Now, you shall be trapped in eternal darkness." Terrified, I turned to flee, but the exit had vanished. The walls closed in around me. suffocating my every breath. Shadows writhed and coalesced, taking form and materializing into monstrous, nightmarish creatures. Desperate to escape, I stumbled through the dark, twisting corridors, pursued by unseen horrors. The mansion itself seemed to be alive, shifting and contorting to prolong my torment. Whispers echoed in my ears, promising me unspeakable pain and eternal suffering. Hours turned into an eternity as I fought for my sanity. Each time I thought I had found an exit, it would vanish or lead me deeper into the labyrinth of nightmares. I could feel the darkness seeping into my soul, eroding my will and replacing it with a primal fear that threatened to consume me. Finally, on the brink of despair, I stumbled upon a hidden trapdoor. With the last remnants of strength, I pried it open and emerged into the moonlit night. Gasping for air, I collapsed onto the grass, my body drenched in cold sweat. To this day, I bear the scars, both physical and psychological, of that harrowing experience. The mansion remains a sinister relic, casting its malevolent influence on all who dare to venture near. I warn you, dear reader, heed my tale and beware the shadows that lurk within the basements of forgotten places. For once awakened, they hunger for souls. Moving in with your girlfriend is a time of extreme excitement and stress. You get to cohabitate with your lover, but you also have to uproot not one, but two separate apartments and graft them together. Shelley and I characteristically waited until the final hour to pack her apartment, and in doing so, found ourselves strung out on Adderall and cigarettes, sorting through piles of junk in her closet at 2 in the morning. Despite the stress, I felt great joy as I helped sort through her things. I felt like an archaeologist studying the anthropology of the one woman I loved most. Her eyes lit up as she regaled me with stories of winning several blue ribbons at the 4-H competitions as a teenager. I heard her wonderful laugh as we looked at the ridiculous haircuts she had in her school photos and pointed to the boys she used to crush on. It further affirmed my love for her and made me excited about opening the chapter of our shared life. As we approached the bedrock of her closet, I discovered a box that read Chester in scratchy red crayon. "Hey babe, what's this?" I asked. "Oh wait, no, don't," she protested. But it was too late. I'd already opened the box and jumped when I found a creepy wooden doll staring at me. Eggshell white paint, which somebody had applied carelessly in short, haphazard strokes, covered the doll's face, and the streaks of rogue on each cheek could not prevent it from looking utterly pallid. Its stringy black hair formed a calic in the back of its head. Its tattered and muddy clothes looked like they might disintegrate if touched. The worst part was its eyes, spaced slightly further than expected from the center. The bright blue pupils were set on bulging wooden balls, conveying an uncannily real earnestness. He seemed coiled up, trying to break free and lunge at me. "Oh, sorry," Shelley said, giggling nervously. "I didn't want you to see this. I'll throw it away now, sorry." "What's the matter?" I asked. "Of all the shit we've gone through tonight, this is hardly the most embarrassing. You really shouldn't be ashamed." "You don't get to decide what I feel ashamed about," she snapped. She stood up, scooped up the doll in her arms like a baby, and walked past the large black bags we'd fill with trash and out the front door. I sat there stupefied as the door slammed loudly. A few moments later, the door gently creaked open, and Shelley returned to the house. Before I could speak, she broke down crying. It was then she told me the story. The doll, Chester, had been in their family for years. It was her grandmother's first and passed down to Shelley's mom and then on to Shelley. I already known that her mom was the abusive alcoholic type, but I didn't know that throughout Shelley's childhood she had forced Shelley to tote that doll around and treat it like a brother. Soccer practice, piano recitals, friends' parties. The doll came with her anywhere she went. If it weren't bad enough to lug it everywhere, her mom would punish her if she didn't talk to it as if it were real. It chaperoned her when she started going on first dates with boys when she was 15. As you can imagine, this didn't work out well for any involved parties. Until Chester started chaperoning dates, Shelley had placated her mother, finding it the simplest solution to avoid the brunt of the drunken beatings. However, the threat of becoming a social pariah in middle school overcame the threat of violence. Shelley would leave the doll at home, only to find it stuffed in her backpack or locker when she returned from lunch. Try as she might, she couldn't escape it. It wasn't until Shelley's mother passed, coincidentally right as Shelley was packing to leave for college, that she realized she couldn't bring herself to leave Chester behind. At the last moment, she threw Chester in a brown box, loaded it into her Subaru, and drove cross-country to college. It remained packed in various closets throughout her mid-20s, a relic of her mother's abuse that she couldn't get rid of. We stayed up the rest of the night together, talking. I listened to her stories and tried to be a supportive partner. Everyone brings their shit to a relationship, and I couldn't stand to see her in so much pain. The following day, she seemed better, so we finished packing and spent the rest of the weekend slogging through move-in tasks. At the end of it, we found ourselves physically beat down, emotionally drained, but fully moved into our new house. We still had a lot of work to do on the place, but we saved a fortune by renovating an old, run-down cabin in the woods. Months passed, and I didn't think about Chester or Shelley's abusive family. That was until the doll started following me too. It started one day when I pulled a book off the shelf and found it crammed in the back of the bookcase. Eyes aligned with the spine of the book, so its big blue eyes were staring straight at me, staring at me. I figured Shelley was pulling a macabre prank. She knew I would start reading Wuthering Heights, so she must have put it there to freak me out. I decided to brush it off. But of course, the pranks continued. Wherever I went, the doll seemed to pop up in our apartment. It was always when she was away, too, to add to the shock factor. Every time I brought it up to Shelley, she would look at me and the doll, stupefied, and protested that she hadn't done it and had no idea where it came from. Soon, she started accusing me of putting Chester everywhere to prank her. It was becoming a very toxic situation. So after the fourth time I found it at the bottom of our laundry bin, I snapped. I grabbed it by the scruff, put it in the trash, and handed the bag to the trash man. I told Shelley when she got home what I had done. She seemed nonplussed at first, but soon found an excuse to leave the house again and did not return for several hours. The following day, I sleepily lumbered into the kitchen and reached in the pantry for the coffee beans. And there it was, the doll. He was sitting there with his porcelain white grin, taunting me. I grabbed it and charged into our bedroom, where Shelley played video games with her headphones on. "We need to talk about this," I said, thrusting the doll at her. "I think you need therapy. If you want to keep it at this point, that's fine, but please stop making it follow me around. It's not funny." She slowly lowered the headphones from her ears, and her face twisted up as she was about to cry. I don't know. Shelley, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I must be firm. If you insist on having the doll in the house, We may need to rethink our living situation. Finally, she erupted, tears streaming down her face and sobs bellowing deeply from her chest. She hadn't cried like this since the night we were packing to move months prior. It was like I had lanced an infected wound. It was pouring out toxic viscera. I tossed the doll down on the floor behind me, and it crumpled haphazardly. An unfamiliar voice cut through the air as I walked across the room to confront. Comfort my apoplectic girlfriend. "This is what happens when you get close to boys," a hoarse, high-pitched voice hissed behind me. "I told you he wasn't good enough for you." My girlfriend stopped crying but stayed hunched over, her long black hair draped over her face. Fighting through the terror, I turned. The doll remained haphazardly crumpled on the floor as I had left it. "Look what he did to me. Look what he did to us," the voice groaned. The doll still did not move. I could not discern the direction from which the voice was coming. It was like it was everywhere and nowhere all at once. "Your mother was right. Only I can protect you. What would Mother think if she saw this wretched scene? You'd go straight into the bad girl room." I picked up the doll in the vain hope there was a recording device installed causing the sound, but there was nothing. It was just an ordinary doll. "You heard him." At this point, I finally realized it. The voice was coming from behind me. It was coming from Shelley. "It's either him or me." She pounced on me and tore and bit at my neck. I let out a cry and dropped the doll to the floor. She scurried to it on all fours in a flash and swaddled it. "The bad man hurt me, sister," Shelley said in her hoarse, doll voice. Through the forest of dark hair covering her face, I could tell she was speaking out of the side of her mouth like a ventriloquist. I'm so sorry, my baby brother," she said in her normal voice. "It won't happen again. Please don't tell Mother." "I'm going to have to tell," she said again through the side of her mouth in the doll's voice. As she did, she clutched her chest in a pantomime of exaggerated terror, as if the doll's promise were the most horrific thing she could ever imagine. "Unless you make the bad boy go away forever." She laid the doll down and rose to her feet. I tried to plead with her to calm down, but she launched at me with the fervor of a caged animal, thrashing, kicking, clawing, and biting. She had me pinned to the bed, and only after a full minute of the assault could I leverage my legs enough to kick her off of me. She twisted and contorted herself before quickly leaping back onto all fours, ready to pounce again. She backed into the doorway, blocking my escape as she prepared to lunge. I dodged past her into the closet and slammed it shut. She clawed at the door and wailed in her doll voice. Get him, sister, get the bad man." Despite the ongoing trauma, the combined scent of our clothes and our shared closet comforted me. It made my heart soar. Shelley was acting crazy, but I figured she had enough of her faculties that sooner or later she would get an axe and go The Shining on my ass. I grabbed an umbrella and prepared to defend against my lover-turned attacker. Then I smelled smoke, and a dull orange glow crept from underneath the door. I held the back of my palm against the heavy wooden door and found it was warm. Shelley must have lit the place on fire. It'd get cooked if I stayed, so I decided to take my chances against my demonic girlfriend and charged through the door. I flung it open and rushed with my umbrella. The smoke that filled the room choked my lungs and burned my eyes. I waded through it to find the exit, but tripped and fell over Chester. The right side of its face was smoking, and its hair was aflame. Matches and a small can of gasoline that Shelley had ostensibly placed were sitting beside him as if he'd done it. Several feet away, she lay collapsed from smoke inhalation. I crawled to her and used that last ounce of my strength to drag her into the hallway, heave her over my shoulder, and carry her to the lawn outside. Cold dew wet the knee of my jeans as I laid her down on the grass bed. She came to moments later and violently hacked up black, sooty snot. It took about 30 minutes for fire and police to arrive at our remote cabin in the woods. By then, our place was a complete inferno. The firefighters gave us some water and blankets, and we sat together on the bumper of the fire truck and watched our first home go up in flames. It was only then that she spoke. "What happened to him?" She croaked, her voice still a little hoarse from the smoke. "He burned up," I said. "He lit a fire and burned up the house." "So, he's gone?" She looked at me hopefully. "Yes." She stared back at the fire and smiled. Her head rested on my shoulder as she quietly sobbed tears of relief. From that night on, we never spoke about it. Over the coming months, Shelley resembled more of her usual self. We laughed and joked while making dinner together and continued our favorite serialized shows as if nothing had happened. The only reminder of our one foul night was the frequent meetings with the police to tell them what happened with the fire. They didn't seem to buy our story of an accident with the fire, but since we weren't seeking an insurance payout, they had difficulty finding a motive for our apparent arson. This, coupled with the fact that it seemed like Shelley genuinely believed that was what happened, meant that they didn't pursue charges. They eventually wrapped up the case, and we settled into our shitty apartment in a crummy neighborhood. I was just glad to be rid of the doll and the weird, inexplicable hold on my girlfriend it had. There were still many unanswered questions, but I wouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. That was until one day Shelley came home with a big white box among the various bag of groceries. "What's this?" I said. "Oh," she squealed excitedly. "It's a surprise." She undid the ribbon with the excitement of a kid on Christmas. My heart sank. I could see big, blue glass eyes peering at me through the mountain of tissue paper in which it lay. She picked the doll up and held it outstretched by its armpits like a baby. "Isn't he cute?" she said with a wide grin. "I think I'll name him Chester." Arg, 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 arg. Mr. Kronk. Oh boy, this one is gonna be a long one. Ave Maria. Any actual singer or musician will probably hate that because I don't know how to sing or anything like that. Like, I'm pretty sure I'm tone deaf. I've always been fascinated by old houses, and when I stumbled upon a neglected Victorian mansion in a small town, I couldn't resist the urge to... Jesus Christ, I cannot speak today, and my throat is very dry.